This is Jason Leopold with TruthOut.org, reporting from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Today I'll be speaking with Joseph Wilson, the former ambassador who wrote an op-ed in July 2003 challenging the Bush administration's assertion that Iraq had been seeking uranium from Niger. The Bush administration retaliated, and that led to the leak of his wife's covert identity for the CIA. Recently, there was a hearing on the civil suit that you and your wife Valerie filed against various officials in the White House, including Dick Cheney, Karl Rove, Scooter Libby, and Richard Armitage. I thought it was interesting that the Vice President and his attorney said that he has ultimate immunity, or absolute immunity, if you will, and that this lawsuit was more about a policy dispute. Could you just explain that a bit on what is happening here behind the scenes?
Well, first of all, I wasn't there. Our attorneys were there. They came away from the hearing believing that we got a good, fair hearing from the judge. Judge was engaged. Judge was skeptical of this notion of absolute immunity. He made the point, I think repeatedly, that the absolute immunity was a unique feature of the office of the president and not necessarily the office of the vice president, and had some exchanges with both the vice president's attorney and then also with our attorney on that particular matter. Now, as I say, I think we came away feeling that the judge saw that there was a wrong that had been committed. Clearly, our position is that the compromise of the identity of a covert CI officer falls well outside the bounds of a legitimate policy dispute. In actual fact, there was no particular policy dispute involved in this. It was really a question, the question I raised in my article that provoked this response on the part of the Vice President and his office, was had the President materially misstated the facts with respect to uranium yellowcake sales from the country of Niger to the country of Iraq. So it wasn't policy, it was a question of truth.
Yeah.
Who was telling the truth? Was the President telling the truth or not? In fact, he wasn't, we know that. So I think that the question, the description of this as a policy dispute is inaccurate on the face of it.
Is there any update on her book, which I understand you have sort of been butting heads, or she has been butting heads with the CIA in terms of vetting it and not allowing certain material to come out? Has there been any?
Well, it's not, the problem is not the material. The CIA Publications Review Board has told her repeatedly, as has the CIA attorney, who's also looked at the book, this contents, that there's nothing significant in the contents of the book that are in and of themselves classified. What they're arguing is that they do not want her to acknowledge that she worked for the CIA before 2002. So what they're basically saying is before 2002, you didn't work for the CIA. You just arrived on our doorstep in a senior management operational position in 2002, fully grown, which of course is absurd. You Google her name, and there's 2 million hits, many of them from newspapers where she served in her career. Political. This is Richard Cheney's last attempt to try and stifle free speech in this country. And we'll beat the son of a bitch on that too, if we have to. We will find the workaround to make sure that this happens, that she will be able to tell her story. And so that somebody other than Dick Cheney, Scooter Libby, Rich Armitage, and Karl Rove can talk about her.
What's the next step with the civil suit? Is the judge coming back with a...
The judge will come back with his judgment, basically, his decision, sometime within 30 to 60 days, he said. I think that he will take a good, serious look at it. We obviously believe the case has merit. And my guess is that whatever the outcome, it'll be appealed by the losing side.
Sure.
People who want to get information on the case or want to contribute to the legal fund can go to www.wilsonsupport.org.
Now, in terms of Karl Rove, since you mentioned him, we've reported extensively on Karl Rove. I personally reported that an indictment was returned. Have you learned anything on your own in terms of what happened with Karl Rove? How did Karl Rove suddenly, escape this? We haven't seen a letter from his attorney, which they claim they have. What's your opinion on what took place behind the scenes? You mentioned earlier that Patrick Fitzgerald did the best job he could.
Well, I would just make a couple of points. One, the crimes that were being investigated were crimes against the country, not crimes against Joe Wilson or against Valerie Wilson.
Exactly.
And as such, Pat Fitzgerald never saw fit to share what he knew with us. The only times we ever spoke to him was when he wanted information, and that was totally appropriate.
Right.
And I've also said quite openly that that I will believe it when I hear it from Pat Fitzgerald's mouth and not before.
Exactly.
In
terms of the fact that whatever's being said.
In terms of anything.
Exactly.
In terms of
Okay.
indictments, proposed indictments, testimony, whatever.
And just for the record, Patrick Fitzgerald has not commented on those issues
right.
that you just
That's
mentioned.
correct.
And lastly, Scooter Libby, obviously he's going to be sentenced next month. Do you believe that he will actually spend any time in jail?
I have no idea, but given the supervisor-subordinate relationship that he had with the President of the United States, because he was an assistant to the President as well as an assistant to the Vice President, it seems to me that sort of a common interpretation of your ethical responsibilities would be that you would recuse yourself from any discussion of how you would handle that particular case because of the nature of your relationship with the person involved. That's what you would do in any corporate structure. That's what
Right.
you would do in any other level. And it seems to me appropriate that the President and the Vice President would recuse themselves from any consideration of a pardon or a commutation of a sentence or whatever the executive powers might hold.
Within the next month, a judge is expected to issue his ruling on the merits of the civil suit that Joe and Valerie Wilson filed against certain members of the Bush administration. This is Jason Leopold reporting for Truth Out in Santa Fe, New Mexico.